Hello, welcome back to the Ranch Horse Resource Podcast. I'm Ronda Van Norman, and I co-host this show along with my husband Ty. Most of what we talk about comes from real ranch work, things that worked and a few things that didn't out here in the high desert. Today we're continuing part 2 of a colt starting with Bill Van Norman. Now in the last episode we stepped back and looked at how the colts were started on our place some 20 and more years ago, kind of what it looked like, what it took, and why it worked. It was a unique situation and it worked really well. Yeah, it took a crew and it took some good horses. It took a tried and true system of pressure and release and not asking too much, but just enough so that every day is building on the day before. Today, we're going to go more in detail. We're going to break it down, why that system worked, and what made those colts come around without seeming like anyone was really even trying. And I'd like you to think about what pieces of it you can still use, even if you don't have a whole crew behind you. If you haven't already listened to part 1, it's a fun listen as well, and it gives just a little more background on how the colts were started on the Van Norman Ranch when Bill Van Norman, which is Ty's dad, was still with us. So let's jump right into today's episode with another question from me. Well, there's a lot of things I can see that's really great with that model, but it's hard to replicate. You have to have, the place for it. You have to have the horses for it, all at the same time, all at the same age, and you have to have a set of good hands.
Yeah, I remember there was a kid we all grew up with. He's still a good friend of mine. And he had brought some colts over from another older gentleman that raised horses and ranched around here. And they were pretty stingy. And he spent the week or whatever time he had to get the first few rides on those colts with us. There was probably, I would want to say 3 or 4 colts. And they were touchy there were a lot of horse. They didn't buck or anything. I don't remember that there or anything like that, but they were just super sensitive and they were going to be really nice horses. And I remember Dad telling him when he was getting ready to leave, he just reminded him, when you get home, these colts aren't going to ride like they did here. You're going to be riding one at a time by themselves kind of deal, because you're going to be by yourself trying to get the next few weeks on them. Now, all of a sudden, they're not going to have all the rest of us drawing them with them. Like there's not all these colts going around here drawing them with them, and they're part of the group kind of deal. They're going to be bothered with you trying to get something out of them because they're going to feel like you're picking on them a little bit. And usually that's when those stingy ones, they either get bothered and try to buck, or you're just going to go through a period there where, so he just warned him about that. And I think that, I remember later on him just mentioning that to me about that he that was something that really helped him when he got back by himself to ride those colts, is just already knowing ahead of time that he was probably going to go through a little bit of that.
Ty, from how you remember starting colts with the group, what are a few things you could say that those colts did really well?
Well, it depends on their goal for them, but like our goal at the time was to make using horses. So a using horse has to be able to steer. It has to be able to drive forward, and it has to be able to turn. And it doesn't have to be able to turn quick or anything like that, but you have to be able to drive it somewhere. It has to come off your legs and go somewhere, and it has to steer. And it shouldn't take too long. I mean, within 15 or 20 rides, 15 rides even, 12 or 15 rides, we traveled all over the country outside, away from the barn, in the brush, up on the mountain, in the rocks, separated from each other, here and there, because they steered and they drove. Like we could point their nose and send them to wherever we were looking, kind of deal. They followed their nose. Yes, at first, you spend time doubling them or pulling them around. I mean, everything's lateral. You don't get vertical without more lateral each side. So you got to balance the sides out, as far as going to the left or going to the right. getting the hindquarters stopped and all that. Well, general for me, I guess, general stuff, but and helping them find a balance so that then they can move straight. They know how to get straight so that they can move straight and they can follow their nose. So that all comes into steering. Like if I want to go slightly to the right and I pick up that right rein, that nose follows that right rein and the feet follow the nose. So their feet and their face are hooked together. And they're moving off of my direction or my thought or, where I want to go. And it doesn't take long to get them hooked on that. So I think that was the benefit of it. Because you're not going to go tearing off across the meadow and rope a calf or something like on those colts at 10 or 15 rides. But you could go gather a field plumb easy because you could steer your colt and go somewhere. You could start putting them to work if you needed to at that age. Pretty easy. Because they knew how to be directed and knew how to come off your legs and go forward. And then everything else is just a continuation of that already. I don't care if it's a turnaround or a rollback or whatever. They still have to know how to drive and pull with their feet and follow their nose. I don't know. I think it's important to have a goal in mind. I mean, everybody's riding their horse for a different reason, but we were riding the horses to make them useful, to do a job on them, right? So I don't care whether you're stuck and you don't have a job and you got to figure out a job, or, got to figure out how to make one in the arena. But if you don't have a goal, well, let me back up. If you've never rode one that was broke either, if you've never finished a horse, it's going to be awful hard to get one past the colt stage. Like if all you've ever done is start colts, but you've never actually kept one or had one long enough to finish it and have an end product that anybody could ride and they could go do anything they wanted to on them, then it's really hard to find a goal. So to know what that end product is. There are things throughout that horse's life, like halter braking and stuff. There are things that I do halter braking those colts that should be beneficial to the way I ride, that I'm teaching that colt from the ground as I'm halter braking and teaching it. And it goes back to those two things, is to follow their nose and to move their feet. So once they get their feet and their face hooked together and know that feel on the end of the lead rope, then that's going to come into play later on when I get on them too. That's going to be the same feel that I'm asking with my rein and the same preparation with my legs to get their feet and their face hooked together. It's just going to be from a different position from me, but that carries on all the way into the end of their career or whatever they are. We have to get, like a colt, we're going to bend them around so that we can isolate certain parts of their body so that we can start to get their feet and their face hooked together. But as they get older, we start riding them more and more straight, meaning we go from two hands to one hand. So now those reins are closer together and they need to ride straighter, but they also still need to maintain bend. So it's really hard to get bend if you've never taught that to begin with. And that's the same thing, like that's what you're doing on the ground. Say I'm on the ground and I'm lunging a horse around me. He's going in a straight line. It's just a curved straight line. Does that make sense? Because he's going in a circle around me. It's the same concept, because he's following his nose. Certain parts of his body have to work correctly in order for him to stay on that line, whether it's straight or bent. I don't know. To me, that's just key. So anytime that horse doesn't understand like how to follow its nose or how to get its feet and its face hooked together, then that's not super useful. That's the main thing. If they're not useful, I don't know what you can do on them, as far as that goes. And there's varying degrees of usefulness.
Talk to me a little bit about what the horses' training had been like before you guys started them. I know they were halter broke. Can you go through a little bit of the process of halter breaking with us so we kind of get the idea of how much handling these horses had? And then if you could answer the question whether they had much groundwork before you actually got the saddle on them. What did all that look like?
It was all minimal. I don't know that. There was definitely no Clinton Anderson or Pat Pirelli stuff going on the groundwork stuff. There was no games too much. We got them caught. Sometimes it just depended on the colt. You just start touching them with the flag, put them somewhere where they weren't going to jump out, start touching them with the flag. Like here, it was really no different than what we do today. Get them where you can touch them with the flag, and I usually rope them, neck them with a soft rope, and work them that way. If they'll start giving that way, great. Every horse is a little different. Some of them don't want to give, and they have a harder time with that rope than they would a halter. I'll just get to where I can get worked up to them and get a halter on them, and then start working on them giving with the halter, because I feel like I can support them a lot better with the halter, especially if they've got more of the flight instinct.
Can you give us an age range of when you're working with them?
Colts are born in April through June here, and we wean in the fall, and hopefully we get them halter broke that fall. So I would say 6 months, 7 months old. I have halter broke them later on, and by then you're almost on the verge of eating a saddle horse, because they're stout enough to just drag you all over the place. So the smaller, the better, but we don't do them as baby colts on their mothers. We don't have our seasons don't allow that really for this seasonal, not seasons as in our ranch seasons don't really allow that time. That's a fall thing. When I was a kid, we didn't halter break them till wintertime. And my grandpa, Charlie, halter broke them mostly in the wintertime then. But like now, and when we started the horse sale, we started halter breaking them a lot earlier, just because the horse sale colts got to get halter broke before the horse sale in September. So there was kind of two different batches of halter breaking went on there.
So when they were halter broke, the way I remember it, Ty, is that they, where you guys would kind of finish with them, is that they would lead. You could lead them anywhere, and you could pet them pretty much anywhere from their head to their tail. Maybe not their legs and all down their feet, every single one. Most of them. There might be some that would be touchier. You just kind of leave them like that. But you could pet them on their head, between their ears, their eyes, certainly down their neck, and all over their back. And they were comfortable being with you. Is there anything else you remember about how you left the colts when you were halter breaking them?
No, I honestly think we do more now with them than we did back then. I mean, when Dad was still alive, there was just a lot of stuff that my dad figured would take care of itself, and then my experience it has over the years, that you don't. Dad always liked to leave a little bit of sting in those colts, or a little bit of try, instead of so desensitize them so much that they were just dull-eyed and their brains shut off. So it was that way when we started them too. I mean, it's why he fed them up. Usually they come off the mountain. They spent the summer on the mountain, and before we started them, he'd try to get them on it. He'd have them so fat on alfalfa that he wanted them to learn to deal with all that energy while we were riding them. I hear of a lot of people, they go the opposite direction. They're going to tie them up to the fence for 2 or 3 days, lead them to water and hay, because they do this or they do that. But they get that done, so they get a few rides on him, then they start letting him eat again, and he wakes up and farts somebody off, or the owner gets him home and drives his head in the ground because he fed him up for a month, because when he got him back, he thought he was too skinny. That's all part of it. So Dad left. I mean, there was little things like picking up the feed on the baby colts. They're going to get shod later on. So, or hobbled or something later on. I don't know. If you have time, great. Go ahead and do it. It was just not necessary at the time, as far as us messing that much with them. We did a lot of things that people would do on the ground, we did from their back after they were started. And people are bored, or they want to go work with their horse. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
So typically when you guys halter broke your babies, you didn't spend time picking up their feet? Is that what you're saying?
Not a lot of time. No, it wasn't like if one needed trimmed or something like that, but there's all kinds of little tricks to that for a colt getting its legs picked up the first time that sure save time and eliminate a lot of wrestling and stuff like that too, in my opinion. But no, it wasn't like top priority. They were petted with the flag. They were petted all over. We just wanted to get them comfortable about being with us, kind of deal. Wanting to be with us. Those colts want to, they just got weaned from their mothers, for one, in most of those cases. So they're looking for somebody to lean on to be around. So we use that to our advantage to get them to lead and to get them to want to be with us, kind of deal.
Talk to us a little bit about how the groundwork looked when you got ready to start them. I know you said you saddled them and you ran them around a day before you got on them. Was there anything else? Was there petting them with the flag or picking their feet up? Or
Oh, yeah. There was probably even a day before we saddled them that one of us, not usually all of us, if there was somebody that got done early and went over to the barn, then they'd usually start catching those colts and just try to get them back to where we left them when we halter broke them. See where they were at, get them caught, mess with them a little bit on the ground, get them to move around us, do a refresher course from our halter breaking from the fall before, I guess, whenever we did it before that. So there was a little bit of that. Yeah. That was probably one of those 15 days or whatever was probably the first day that we'd run them all up there loose and then just get them caught and mess with them that way. So
I remember things going pretty smooth, but one thing I do remember is that sometimes you just have to get on those horses when they were moving a little bit. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Tell us a little more.
You didn't want to be trying to get on one when everybody else is tearing around there or bumping into you or so I'd just get them. For me, I would just try to get them as good as I could. I mean, everybody'd step up and down a few times on them. My brother and my dad were two people you wanted to keep your eye on, because if their butt looks like it was going to hit the saddle before yours did, then there was a good chance you were going to have to get mounted and not the best setup.
Well, in that type of progression, there's not a lot of time for a horse to learn to stand. You don't spend a lot of time working with the horse to learn to stand. So it's momentary, like there's a little window to get on, and that's when you get on.
But you're going to be getting on and off of them, quite a bit in a week. So, and the other thing is they're going to get tired. Like they get tired. So like getting on and off would be at the end of the day. That's when I would, like if we had an issue, like if I got on, but he was moving the first time when I got on, when our ride's over and they're kind of, because they would be out of air and that barn held the it was kind of humid in there with all the horses sweating and stuff, even though there might be 1.5 feet or 2 feet of snow outside. That barn was humid in there. So everything was sweaty and puffing. And then when we'd get back to the round trail, that's where you'd spend time getting on and off, petting on them, getting on and off or whatever, if that was an issue when you went to get on. So instead of making that an issue when their energy was up and things were rolling, wait until that energy's down. And we did it then, and it didn't take long, and they were standing. Like they'd all be standing when you go get on.
Ty, I know you helped your Grandpa Ray Hunt start colts at various clinics in different parts of the country from time to time. What difference can you see happened in those clinics as opposed to what happened at home on your family's ranch with the Van Normans?
It was way more laid back and a little bit wilder at home. I do remember being around Grandpa. I was fairly comfortable, but there were certain things you'd start to do and think, better not, because someone might see that and relate it to, might see it and take and interpret it wrong. I would either figure out a different way to do it or not do it at all, just get by without it kind of deal. Something I would maybe do at home. And then there was other times where I did do something and Grandpa would use that for an example. Like he'd say, see, Ty's doing this, blah, 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 kind of deal. And there was other times where I was about to do something and Grandpa would say, and Ty's going to do this now. And it wasn't nothing like I was planning on doing. So I would switch to do it the way he was suggesting that I was telling everybody I was going to do it. So it worked out too, and that way I learned something too.
Did your dad give a lot of verbal help?
I'm going to say minimal.
He was a more kind of, you watch and learn from him? You could
learn more from Dad talking to the other people there. He had a hard time a lot of times answering questions from me. Like if I had a direct question. Usually someone else there would ask the question that you were thinking or something and it would get answered. It didn't matter whether you were at a Tom clinic or Ray Hunt clinic or with Dad at home too. Somebody that was there would ask the question, either the hired man or something like that. Or, there was times where like I was about to do something. Say you had one that was kind of sold up and you were about to give him one big boot, and Dad would say, whoa, don't do that yet. He was seeing something from where he was at that I wasn't seeing, so you might go about it different, instead of kicking on him, maybe you got your tail, you rope down and tapped on him or whatever, just to change that reaction so that reaction would be more desirable for what you wanted. There was little things like that. A lot of what we probably picked up from Dad was just, watching him do it. There would be a few times, like when we first started, that, that he might suggest something, but for the most part, it was just watching. I learned better by watching people anyways, seemed to. But if you asked, he would try, he would dang sure try to give you an answer. Because I think it was a lot like he understood it, but he didn't know how to teach it. And yeah, and for, everybody talks about how smooth my dad was and how quiet he was and stuff with the horse. He liked fast stuff too. Like a lot of people didn't get to see the everyday ranch stuff with Dad, like on those colts. I mean, he was quiet with his hands. He was smooth. I should say he was smooth, not so much quiet, I guess, is just smooth. Like his timing was good. And he was the first one to goose somebody's colt. I remember the time Troy and I got old enough to start chasing him around, and he'd be screaming, "Get away from me!" Just because we'd be trying to do the same thing to his colts. So it was funny as long as it was somebody else. And then I'm sure he'll enjoyed the whole bunch of it, as far as that goes. But he didn't mind fast stuff going fast either.
He also didn't like things to be in a wreck.
No, he liked everybody to be safe. So.
And he didn't like horses to get troubled or bothered.
Yeah, and that being said, I mean, that's part of being able to read those colts, too, starting out. So that was the nice thing about the colts when I grew up that we were raising, were pretty dang nice. I mean, there was other people that brought other colts there, or we picked up other colts here and there that were not as well bred or not as nicely bred as ours, I guess, that were dang sure they had some issues, right off the bat kind of deal. It was more challenging, I guess, to get rides on some of them and just to get them to relax and do stuff. So it's, my dad had been through all that before they started raising horses. And if there was a horse in there that had an issue, a major issue, it was going to turn into something bigger. It was one of those deals where we took care of it separate or did something. It wasn't part of the group, as far as that big, everybody get on and we're just tearing around there. Those were all colts that could handle it, that were not going to get bothered doing that. And if they did, it was just like, I mean, if you did actually go and spook one and it did buck or something like that, it wasn't something that, was in there for good. It wasn't some part of their normal demeanor, kind of deal. For us, it wasn't so much about getting them gentle, because the riding got them gentle. I mean, they had to be gentle enough to get saddles on them and stuff like that, but they didn't have to be puppy dog gentle and just give out and dull gentle, like desensitized so much that the main things that they got used to doing is, like I said before, is following their nose and getting their feet hooked to their face where they were their feet, where you could drive them. You could send their feet somewhere and then point them with their nose, or point them and then send their feet back and forth. So their feet and their face were hooked together. And really, in the process of that, they learn pressure and release. Like they learn how to take some pressure, and then when they get right, how the pressure comes off, and you can just keep building on that. So to me, that carries on through the rest of their life, and that would get checked every day, especially starting them. Like, at first your turnarounds, maybe one step at a time, but you have to put a little, you point the nose, get the feet to follow, and then, you're going to have to add some pressure there to get the feet to keep following. And then you might only get 2 or 3 steps before they blow out or swing out a different way, or, they come out of frame. And so that's a pressure release. Once they figured out that the release is leaving their hindquarters there and wringing their front end around, So they're dealing with pressure and release. So you're constantly setting those 4 things up all the time while you're riding them from start to finish. And they get to where they can handle more and more pressure as far as that goes, more and more asking, and find the correct answer quicker and quicker. Just the way you present it. I think that's a little bit where some of the guys having a hard time finishing a colt or getting it. Say they started as a 2-year-old and they got through the basics and it was great, and then they want to try to go on with it, and they got a 3 and 4-year-old that's not riding any better than their 2-year-olds. It's because they're still doing the same foundation instead of perfecting those maneuvers. You know what I mean? Like, so instead of taking their foundation and asking the horse to do that maneuver a little cleaner or a little faster or a little more correct with some speed, something in there, pushing them to another level, then that the horse has a hard time advancing, because now doesn't ride as well as his age says he should.
Ty, if you could give the listener a handful of takeaways, and not that they can replicate the same system, but if they could take a few things away that worked really well, what would be some of your key thoughts?
Well, most people aren't going to be able to start colts in a group, so I'm not sure. That was just an example of how we did it, and it was a lot easier on the horse for sure. But you're just going to have to remember that if you're by yourself and you're trying to get something done with your colt, that there's a good chance they're going to think you're picking on them a little bit because you're the only one they can focus on. It is nice, like if you're starting a colt, have somebody, your wife or one of your kids, get on an older horse, and then you can buddy up to that one and go outside, where you can ride around it or go past it or something like that. It takes the focus off of you a little bit. I've even kind of halfway rode colts, maybe not right at the very, very beginning of starting them, but putting a cow in the arena. The only reason I don't like another horse with no rider on there is because sometimes those horses get pissy and they will kick you. That's really not super fun. But if you could put a cow in there, and it'll kind of take that colt's mind away from just asking them to do stuff, and you might get a turn here and there, or lope a circle and put it back on the trach of the cow or something like that. Get something to distract it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think one of the main takeaways for me, Ty, is that the colts were never over prepared. You kind of just got them good enough to go, and then you went with them and you gave them a job.
I guess that would be the main takeaway, is not to get them too tired, I guess, or get them so dull they're not learning anything. There's a period there when they're fresh and it's hard for them to learn because they're so fresh. There's a small window in that time period that you're working with them that they're going to pick up on things. When the fresh is kind of down, and they can still think, then there's a period there where you get them too tired and their brain shunts off and they don't retain anything. So, like especially on them colts, you're adding so many new things to their daily routine all of a sudden starting these colts that it takes them a little, there's going to be a lot of ebb and flow, like a lot of highs and lows kind of deal there. And I don't think there's ever such a thing as one getting away with anything. That used to be a big thing, and maybe there was when we were starting colts that were 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds or something like that, because those things are pretty set in their ways by then. So yeah, they might be getting away with something, but as a coming 2-year-old, they're really not getting away with anything. I think the biggest lesson is the fact that you get to start over again. So if you can get them to a point where you didn't push them to a point where they had to fight back, where you can just leave them somewhere and let them catch their air or start over the next day, they're just going to get better and better. But like I said, once you get to a certain point there where those horses are, they're just shut down, like you can't, they're not retaining anything. So you just will get off of them and put them up. So like in the course of our day starting colts, we would each had 5 or 6 head to ride depending on how much time we had for the day. But that's, so, say we feed cattle until 10 or 11 o'clock, we might get 1 or 2 rode before noon and then 3 after lunch because it's dark by 4 o'clock and everybody's headed home. So, or 4:30. So roughly, probably 45 minutes is all we spent on those colts from the time we caught them and saddled them to the time we got off of them. And some even less than that. Like if they rode around there nice and everything was good, we didn't have to keep riding them. And then as the time progressed and it didn't take so long to saddle them and so long to get on them and so long to get the fresh off of them and so long to, then we'd start finding other little jobs for them. Or that's maybe when we were starting to go outside. And so the rides would get a little bit longer because you were going farther, going and doing something and coming back. But that first 3 or 4 days, I would say you'd be pushing it if you went 45 minutes. So I guess we were just riding them for a job. You're creating everything you did was creating them to go do a job on them, picking that deer trail in the snow and going up the deer trail or going between two pieces of sagebrush or around a rock and through a bush or something like that where you were blocking and driving or pointing, setting up so they could see those spots, those trails. The one end of the barn, you had to go through the man door because we didn't open the big door because it wanted to fall off the hinges. So we rode the 2-year-olds through the little man door you rode through there. So it would be dark in the barn coming from the outside in and bright from the out, coming from the inside of the barn out. Usually it was a sheet of ice. We slid off the mountain or off the hillside there and down into the lot that was in front of the barn. And there were some times where things went down. I remember Troy riding one down sitting on its side as it tobogganed down off there and got back on it when it got to the bottom and stood up, just little things like that. You didn't know what was going to happen. That was all part of I guess the fun, the excitement of it, I guess, part of it. But it was all part of those horses learning how to deal with everyday stuff that they were going to have to spend the rest of their lives doing. So that was all part of the job, as far as they were being prepared for a job.
Well, as always, I had a lot of fun recording this episode, but I'm going to wrap it up today, and I'm just going to leave you with a little fun mention of a Western Horseman article that was done on the Van Normans back, I don't know, almost 20 years ago when they were still starting colts this way. I'll leave the link to that article called Snow Colts in the show notes.
Good thing they came then because there ain't enough snow nowadays to even make snow colts a thing.
Man, isn't that the truth? Our area didn't even see much snow at all this winter. We're so dry. Well, anyways, it's fun to look back and think of how things used to be. And sometimes there's a lot of things that are still the same. The Van Normans are still riding good horses and still using the same good foundational ideas that worked way back then. But if there's something that you can take from all this, it's sure not that you need to have a bunch of deep snow or a big bunch of horses to start. It's more about a system that understands that keeping their feet moving and building on the idea of putting that horse right where you want it is important. So today, even if you're by yourself, it's still the goal to keep it simple, keep the right thing easy, and keep progressing a little more every day. Because shoot, whether it's a colt from 25 years ago or one that you're getting on this week, it's all the same thing. It's a horse that follows his nose and isn't afraid of moving his feet where you ask it. So, if this episode helped you see something a little clearer, go ahead and share it with someone who's maybe starting a colt. And if you want help with your specific situation, you can book a one-on-one call with Ty or even send in your video and get direct feedback on just exactly what you're dealing with. You can find all that at ranchhorseresource.com. So anyway, thanks for riding along with us, and we'll see you next time. I don't know what we'll talk about, maybe big loop roping or maybe problems with dry mares in a stud bunch. I don't know, but it'll be fun, I'm sure. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week. I'll leave the link to that article called Snow Colts in the show notes.